Special counsel Jack Smith is telling Republicans, game on. In a letter just released from his attorneys to Congressman Jim Jordan and Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairs of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, Jack Smith is offering to testify, but he wants to do so in a public hearing about the investigations he conducted. Jack Smith's attorneys writing this, quote, given the many mischaracterizations of Mr. Smith's investigation into President Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents and his role in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election, Mr. Smith respectfully requests the opportunity to testify in open hearings before the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. Jack Smith's team added just one caveat, quote, he's prepared to answer questions about the special counsel's investigation and prosecution, but he requires assurance from the Department of Justice that he will not be punished for doing so. Jack Smith is making this offer to testify in full view publicly because and after Republicans have alleged for weeks now that Jack Smith's team unlawfully tapped the phone records of members of Congress who may have had a role in Trump's effort to overturn his 2020 election defeat. On that issue, Jack Smith defended his team and his investigation in a letter to Republicans on Tuesday. He writes this, quote, as described by various senators, the toll data collection was narrowly tailored and limited to the 4 days from January 4th, 2021 to January 7th, 2021, with a focus on telephonic activity during the period immediately surrounding the January 6 riots at the U.S. Capitol. The subpoena's limited temporal range is consistent with a focused effort to confirm or refute reports by multiple news outlets that during and after the January 6 riots at the Capitol, President Trump and his surrogates attempted to call senators to urge them to delay certification of the 2020 election results. In other words, Jack Smith, the investigator, was doing what investigators do. He was doing his job, investigating efforts by Donald Trump to get his allies to stop the election from being certified. The attacks from Republicans are part of a steady but increasingly loud drumbeat to target people on Donald Trump's enemies list. And of course, the only federal prosecutor to indict Donald Trump and indict him twice is high on Donald Trump's list. Jack Smith, for his part, has been increasingly public about what he is watching happen to the Justice Department in which he served and to the rule of law more broadly in this country under Donald Trump. Here's what he said back in September about the pardons of those who stormed the U.S. Capitol. It's video first obtained by The Bulwark.
Trying to stop the democratic process, trying to stop the lawful transfer of power, vandalizing our Capitol, intimidating lawmakers, and assaulting police officers. This is among 1,500 pardons that were granted in January of this year. They were pardoned by the president because they committed their crimes in his name and in his interest.
They committed their crimes in his name and in his interest. Special counsel Jack Smith speaking out about the rule of law and against Donald Trump is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Mark Harris is here, former senior investigative counsel for the House Select Committee on January 6, joins us. New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is here. My friend and colleague, MSNBC senior political analyst and contributing host to Pod Save America, Alex Wagner, is with me at the table for the hour. Her new weekly podcast, Runaway Country, premieres today. So excited about that. We'll save some time to talk about it.
Thank you, my friend.
Glenn Thrush, let me start with you. Jack Smith, you and I think were on the air together when we first heard his voice in a public interview. It was a conversation with my colleague, Andrew Weissman, who was one of the first people to investigate Team Trump and the Mueller probe. What do you make of this? I'll call it a salvo, back to Jim Jordan. Yeah, I'll testify, but I'm going to do it in public with the lights on and cameras rolling and public witnesses.
I will invoke my tabloid past and say, Jack doesn't want to go in the box.
I love that.
I just had to get that out there.
That's good. Thank you.
Well, look, we've known for a really long time that Jordan and the House Republicans do not want Jack Smith testifying in public. So to some extent, this is kind of a chess move in order to sort of keep them from doing what they did to a couple of the people with whom he worked, Tom Windham and another former one of his staffers. So what he wants to do is have his voice heard in public. He does not want to give Jim Jordan and the House Republicans the opportunity to distort what he says or even to characterize what he says. And I think what we're seeing here is an evolution of Smith from being a guy who realized that silence when he was in the employ of the Department of Justice was his guiding principle and his friend, to realizing now that he's in an entirely different environment. Books are coming out that are going to be discussing what he has done. Republicans are attempting on various fronts, both in Congress and in the Department of Justice, to accuse him of doing a politicized investigation. And I think he realizes that if he does not speak out and if he does not represent himself, he is going to be in a considerable amount of trouble. So to some extent, Smith, who is a guy who got the job initially as special counsel because he was viewed as an expediter, as somebody who was impatient to take action in whatever he did, whether he was going to decline a prosecution or proceed with a prosecution. You're seeing that same level of grabbing the bull by the horns.
Mark, let me play you some of this evolution that Glenn describes from Mueller-like, in Jack Smith's own telling, to reading the room in very much a similar journey, I think, that President Obama, in a different context, in a ex-president context, has articulated, from not speaking out very often, picking his moments. He's now one of the tips of the spear in protecting democracy and involving himself and encouraging people to get off the sidelines. Jack Smith, in some ways, has taken a legal journey that parallels that. Let me play you his explanation.
The Robert Mueller view of how to do this, that's where I come from. That's my view, and that's really how the Department of Justice does it, I've seen throughout my career. And there's a reason for it. The reason is you do not want to be saying things before a trial that are going to make it hard for the defendant to get a fair trial, right? You don't want to be sort of polluting the jury pool in your favor, saying things that they, because the usual case is a case where the government has a lot of power and has a megaphone, and the defendant most often doesn't. And so those rules, that way of doing things, has been a department tradition. And in fact, a lot of the local rules of the courts that we practice in limit what you can say as a prosecutor. And so in my role as special counsel, I handled things very much as I did throughout my career. It's like we often say, do your talking in the courtroom, not on the courthouse steps. And so that's how I did things. I think that it is worth a conversation going forward about how we move things and how we handle things and how we think about these things. Now, I'm not arguing in favor of a sort of wholesale, one side blasts something out on social media and then the other side does, and we do that sort of thing. But I do think we need to think about it differently, because we're in a different age now and we communicate with each other differently.
Mark, I don't know what was on his mind there, but one of the failures of the public's understanding of the Mueller investigation is that the public has no understanding of the substance of the Mueller investigation. One of the successes of the congressional probe into January 6th is that it was so effective at informing the public, with Democratic and Republican members of Congress helping to do the storytelling, helping to elicit truthful testimony out of witnesses, all of whom were in Donald Trump's inner circle, none of whom were anti-Trump figures. Some of them were out of the arena, law enforcement. But tell me what you think of this sort of public rumbling with how to communicate about, one, Donald Trump's conduct around January 6th, and two, this moment we're in now.
Well, I agree with what Glenn mentioned it earlier and what Jack Smith said in that interview, that the tendency for federal prosecutors in particular in the Department of Justice that I'm familiar with, I spent many years as a federal prosecutor, and I've been, even since I've left the U.S. Attorney's Office, interacting with federal prosecutors for decades. And the ethos is to let the facts in court do the talking. That's for reasons, as Jack Smith mentioned in that interview, that you don't want to poison the case, but it's also just not what we do. And so I understand the reticence. I understand the fact that that he referred to, or you referred to as the Mueller approach, is sort of the way things have been done in the past. I won't speak for Jack Smith. I've never met him. I don't know him. I don't know why he's taking the position he's taking. But I do know that a lot of federal prosecutors who are used to that, former federal prosecutors who are used to that approach, are revisiting it and thinking, we do need to get the story out. And that's why you're seeing multiple times in the last several months, letters signed by hundreds, if not thousands, of former prosecutors to speak out about the attack on the rule of law and so forth. And this latest effort by Jim Jordan, who, by the way, refused to comply with the subpoena to come talk to Congress when he was asked and had relevant information in connection with January 6th, I think really did call out for some type of response to set the record straight on this ridiculous claim of wiretapping of GOP senators.
Joining us now, staff writer at The Atlantic, Toulouse Olorunnipa, Punchbowl co-founder and MSNBC political contributor Jake Sherman, former Montana senator and MSNBC political analyst Jon Tester, and writer-at-large and host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller. He is also an MSNBC political analyst. Toulouse, you write a piece about this entire situation entitled "Trump is Trying and Failing to Shield MAGA from the Shutdown." You write, quote, "Farmers, a key constituency for Trump, are among those getting hurt. The Department of Agriculture halted crucial farm aid just as planning for the 2026 planting season was getting underway. Furloughs and mass layoffs, meanwhile, have decimated a small business lending program popular in rural communities. Federal subsidies keeping small town airports afloat are scheduled to run out within days. And despite what Trump might suggest, the majority of the federal employees who are currently going without a paycheck live outside of Washington, D.C., the D.C. metropolitan area. Trump-friendly West Virginia, for instance, has among the highest number of government workers per capita in the country. Trump has been clear he is going after Democratic states, so-called Democratic programs. But some of the states that have the largest workforces we mentioned of federal employees are Oklahoma, where I hail from, West Virginia. Tell me about the impact on Trump's own base here.
Yeah, I should start by saying that Americans are being hurt by the shutdown writ large, and the president, in any other normal time, the president would be concerned about that. Any American being harmed, not getting a paycheck, not being able to get their benefits because the government is shut down. But President Trump has talked about this shutdown by saying that Democrats are the ones that are being hurt. Democrats are being killed by the shutdown, that this is a shutdown that gives us an opportunity to go after Democratic programs and also to protect Republicans. And so he's seen it in this very red-blue kind of partisan lens. But when you actually look at how people are being impacted, a lot of Republican states, a lot of Republican constituents, including farmers, including people in rural America, are being hurt by this shutdown. And we've seen the president try to have new carve-outs, try to open up programs that previously were closed to try to protect and help members of his own party. But he only has a certain amount of power. He cannot do exactly what he wants to do to shield his own voters from this shutdown. And so we have seen farmers, we have seen rural Americans, small business owners, a number of different people, even people who are trying to access airports in small towns being impacted by the shutdown. And things would only get worse if this continues into November, when SNAP and other programs, including the thing that at the very heart of this shutdown, which is the healthcare subsidies, those are disproportionately used by Republicans in places like Florida and Georgia and Texas, places that did not expand Medicaid. And so very soon this will become even more of a problem for red state Americans, and Trump will have even more reason to engage on this and to make sure that his voters are not harmed by the situation that we're in.
So, Toulouse, then how does the administration defend the position here?
Well, they are still talking about this in a partisan lens, blaming Democrats, saying that any pain from this shutdown is coming because of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats not opening the government. And they're still talking about this as a partisan situation where, Democrats are the ones that are being harmed by Rust vote, taking away energy subsidies and whatnot. And he listed 16 states that were won by Kamala Harris in November. He did not mention the state of Montana, which was also impacted by this. I talked to local leaders in the town of St. Regis. They were expecting new jobs coming from a hydrogen project, and that was canceled by this. They lost out on potentially millions of dollars, and they had to cancel this program. And they had just lost a sawmill 4 years ago. And now they are not being able to get these jobs that were supposed to come in through this energy program that was going to revitalize the town of St. Regis. And so this is something that you can try to surgically hit Democrats by cutting off programs, but you're going to harm Americans and you are potentially going to harm Republicans as well. And so they are talking about this in a partisan lens. How it's being felt across the country is very much different.
Jake, let's go over to Capitol Hill for a moment. We already see Republicans trying to figure out these workarounds. Senator Josh Hawley trying to propose a bill to restore funding for SNAP projects. What are they telling you behind closed doors, or what are they saying in the hallways there about their concerns here?
Well, let me just put it this way. SNAP is probably the most concerning of all of these programs. SNAP, which is effectively food stamps, feeds 40-something million people. And states around the country, red, blue, and everything in between, have said the federal government has told them that they don't have money to issue benefits for November. That's a huge problem. I mean, governors are now trying to find other ways, state workarounds, food banks, to try to fill that hole. They're not going to be able to fill that hole, obviously, because this is millions of people in some of these states, in some of the big states. I think California, it's $5.5 million. The position has been, generally speaking, that neither chamber is going to pass these one-off bills to fill the hole during the shutdown. Now, Senate Democrats today blocked a bill that would have paid federal workers during the shutdown, which is, effectively a political decision because they thought Trump would have too much power to pay who he wanted during the shutdown. Now, there is a chance, perhaps, I don't know, we'll have to see, that Hawley's bill will work, which would, as you said, fund SNAP. And Mike Johnson signaled that the House would come back into session. They've been out of session for more than a month to pass that bill. But that's not been the MO so far, right? I mean, they've not passed these one-off bills. In previous shutdowns, you'd have the House and Senate on the floor trying to get through bills to reopen parts of the government, reopen the DOD, reopen, various agencies. That's just not happening this time around. Yeah. The Republicans' position has been that Democrats should not block the funding bill, the clean funding bill that the House passed more than a month ago.
And of course, Democrats are digging in when it comes to the ACA subsidy extensions. A Trump-aligned pollster, Jake, released Wednesday some numbers that show that many people feel as though the longer this drags out, the more they are likely to blame Republicans, and also the less likely they are to vote for the people who don't extend those tax credits. Senator Thune has said that he would set a vote on ACA subsidies if the Democrats reopen the government. He told our Ali Vitale that recently. Are congressional Republicans moving closer to working with Democrats on this issue? And are Democrats any closer to kind of taking the olive branch from them?
I would say that we are probably farther than we've ever been from to extend these tax credits. The more both sides dig in, the less likely, in my view, it becomes. Although I think Republicans will take the blame if these subsidies are not extended and they expire, and health care premiums go up for millions and millions of Americans. I think that will be Republicans will be blamed for that, undoubtedly. Now, I don't know who's going to get blamed for this shutdown. Democratic polls say Republicans get blamed. Republican polls say Democrats get blamed. So I'm not entirely sure, nor am I sure that it actually matters next year in an election year. We're 12 months, a little bit more than 12 months from an election. That is eons away in Trump's universe. But and I think the president has said a bunch of times he wants to work on health care writ large. I think that is a morass that the Republicans are going to get bogged down in for months. Senator Tester was here when Republicans tried to do this last time, tried to repeal and replace Obamacare. It never goes well. It's not a good issue for Republicans. But I think there is some concern in the White House that they have to somehow try to solve this problem.
So, Senator, how do we solve this problem when it seems that parties are at loggerheads, and the more workarounds we see, that seems to benefit the Republicans in holding this out, and the more intransigent Democrats seem, it doesn't fare well with the American people? What do we do?
Yeah, the American people end up losing in this situation big time. And I would just say this, a couple things for the record. These aren't Democrat programs or Republican programs. These are programs that affect everybody. And when you start eliminating programs, it impacts everybody. We talked about the energy project in Montana, a state that voted just overwhelmingly for Trump. Voted me out of office, did everything right from a Trump point of view. They get their energy program cut. So everybody feels the wrath, especially rural America. So how does it get solved? First of all, the president has to not want to have the shutdown continue. That's first of all. I think he thinks this shutdown is a winner for him. I don't think it's a winner for anybody. And I think everybody's going to get blamed, and especially the Republicans, since they control the House, the Senate, and the White House. But when people start talking and understand that these subsidies to make sure that health insurance doesn't go through the roof is not a bad thing to do for everybody, Democrats, Republicans, independents, the works, then I think we'll see a government shutdown end.
So, Tim, is the shutdown a winner for President Trump and the Republicans, or the longer this drags on, as Senator Tester mentioned, they're the ones with the power here, it looks bad?
Yeah, I mean, look, to Jake's point, I think that the Democrats have done a good job of making this shutdown about the extension of these subsidies. And if people are seeing their health care premiums go up, I think Republicans are probably going to get blamed for that. To the question of whether this is a political winner or loser for Trump, this is maybe an unsatisfactory answer for people, but the answer might be basically neither outside of the context of the health care issue. We're 13 months away from the next midterm. The way Trump does business, there are going to be a million controversies and scandals between now and then. What the economy looks like next year is going to be a big factor in how the midterms turn out. I think that this shutdown is likely going to be a distant memory unless we're still shut down by then, which I guess is not a 0% possibility. But and so I think that because there are not acute political consequences for either side right now in the shutdown, I think that explains why this has been unlike some of the ones we've seen in the past, where this is, going on kind of indefinitely, and there's not a clear path back to the negotiating table. Traditionally, or at least in modern times, this has been a Democratic president that wants to keep the government open, negotiating with a Republican Congress that wants to cut spending. So there's at least a terms of debate there to work from. We don't have that here. This president, I don't think, cares that much about whether the government's open or not. And as you mentioned, sees this as a winner. The Democrats have a base that wants them to fight, and so they see this as kind of a winner for them. And American people are suffering, and until that suffering becomes a political problem for one side or the other, I think this is going to go on.
Tonight, Jack Smith calling the Republicans bluff on their conspiracy theories. Plus, our live interview with the Democratic lawmaker who is suing Speaker Johnson for refusing to let her get to work. And then that moment in the New York City debate when Mamdani calling out Cuomo on his sexual harassment allegations.
One of those women, Charlotte Bennett, is here in the audience this evening. She cannot speak up for herself because you lodged a defamation case against her. I, however, can speak.
But we begin tonight with Trump demolishing part of the great symbol of American democracy. The East Wing of the White House now reduced to rubble, so Donald Trump can build himself a playroom. Earlier today, Secret Service reportedly closed access to the ellipse to block journalists from capturing footage of the wreckage. The AP managed to get this photo. Trump promised his ballroom project would not impact the East Wing at all, and now he's made an abrupt about-face.
With the current building, it'll be near it but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of. It's my favorite place. I love it. We determined that after really a tremendous amount of study with some of the best architects in the world, we determined that really knocking it down, trying to use a little section, the East Wing was not much. In order to do it properly, we had to take down the existing structure.
The American people are overwhelmingly opposed to this destruction. Only 24% are behind the idea. And it's going to be even more expensive than previously known. Trump upping the price tag to $300 million. That money allegedly being raised from private companies and individuals, including Comcast, MSNBC's current parent company. The move even has some Republicans on edge.
Particularly bad.
They're bad. It looks like, people are saying, oh, the government's being destroyed. Well, now it looks like the White House is physically being destroyed. The optics are not good.
Yeah, they're not good at all. Meanwhile, late night hosts pointing out that Trump's demolition is the kind of thing that movie villains do in the first act.
This is the first thing aliens do in movies to announce they're evil. They blow up the White House. Trump is just cutting out the middleman of invading aliens. We used to need the aliens to come, but not anymore. We're doing it ourselves.
If this were the movie script for the final season of America, reviewers would be calling it riddled with cliches. I mean, come on, we've all seen the villain destroy the White House. Oh, wait, Trump is physically destroying part of the White House. Well, we've seen the part where the villain pardons all of his cronies and friends. Oh, wait, Trump just pardoned a crypto billionaire who does business with his family. And wasn't it Dr. Evil and Austin Powers who demanded $1 million in ransom? Now Trump is demanding the Justice Department pay him $230 million. Joining me now to discuss, Maya Wiley, former SDNY civil prosecutor and president and CEO for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Douglas Brinkley, presidential historian and professor at Rice University. Maya, I'll start with you. It's cliche to say, OK, Trump is a dictator and engaging in dictatorial acts. But I think what's important here is we have a president who's already been in bed with so many different businesses, so many different things that appear to be corrupt. What does it say that a new wing of the White House, where government business is conducted, is being built by private donors? Where does that become a problem down the road for this country?
I don't even know what to say about that, Jason. I mean, look, the imagery alone I think, speaks volumes about exactly the message Donald Trump has said in his presidency, which I will destroy in order to do what I want to do, whatever that is, and no matter the cost. And in this case, this kind of sense of quid pro quo, you do for me and I'll do for you, is exactly the optics that this creates, because we've already saw this with the fundraising that he did for his inaugural committee, for example. We saw an incredible rush of people to make sure that they were writing checks to get within his good graces. And when you look at his pardon history, I mean, there's no question most presidents who look at pardons are looking at what is the policy decision I am making, right, and what message does it send to the people of this country? And the one that Donald Trump sends repeatedly is that I'm trying to get done what I want to get done for me, and whoever will pay for it, good. And then I will help with the power that I have been given to do what I need to do for them. I mean, because let's remember, this Binance, very wealthy Binance businessman, let's also remember what he was accused of: allowing sex trafficking, drug trafficking, child sex abuse to happen. I mean, this is the fact that Donald Trump is sending the signal that this is okay by pardoning should also speak volumes at a time when we're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files being made public.
Douglas, I think it's something of note here. We have popular culture examples of villains becoming the president. Lex Luthor was president of the United States for years. Superman was going crazy. But it's something else when it's happening in reality. And we have polling that says that literally the majority of the public now feels that Donald Trump is acting like a dictator. The view of Trump as a dangerous dictator, source PRRI survey, increasing numbers of Americans view Trump as a dangerous dictator rather than a strong leader. A majority of Americans, 56%, agree that President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. Douglas, that's not subtle. That's the American people saying, I think this guy is going to write the end of the script for this country. What do the American people do about this?
Well, they have to register and vote and get involved with local politics.
But there's a lot going on, I think, right now. First off, with the East Wing demolition, it's horrendous. I do history preservation for a living. I think Senator Lisa Murkowski's spot on right, but I was wondering, where are these other Republicans? Since when is it okay to bulldoze the East Wing and lie? Like you just played the clip. Oh, just be little, it won't touch the building. And now have these videos and photographs. This is going to live forever. The images that we've seen, just like January 6th protest riot for Donald Trump. This will be a symbol of his destroying a part of the White House that's going to live on with photographic imagery long time to come, because so many people aren't paying attention. Everybody's worried about the, rightfully so, the prices of the grocery, the shutdown, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, on down. But one thing people can understand, that only an ass would go in and blow up the East Wing in front of cameras in such a gratuitous and vulgar, it's just completely unsensitive to what any concept of what Washington, D.C. is, and why our National Mall is so special, and why we fix things incrementally and renovate in a proper ways and consult with the right architects. President Trump has a right to do a lot as a builder or bulldozer in his life as a business person, but I don't feel he has a right. I'm not talking legal rights. I'm talking an American citizen right to go in and firebomb and blow up iconic structures like the White House in such a willy-nilly and arrogant fashion. I don't see how it puts points on the board for him politically. And I think the MAGA movement that he created is starting to see this is a president more interested in legacy for himself, international affairs, and is forgetting the working people in his MAGA base that brought him to the White House for this second term.
So, Doug, I want to follow up with this because you're a historian. What I see here is not just destroying something, but like I said, rebuilding it. I mean, the idea of a wing of the White House being brought to you by McDonald's and FanDuel and Geico is insane to me. It's being built by sort of private investors. But what I often hear from people saying is, these look like the actions of someone who's not planning to move. And the White House has generally been a place where people only make subtle changes because they know they're supposed to be gone in 4 to 8 years. Do you think that people who have that kind of concern, who think the reason this president is making these kinds of moves is because he has no plan to leave in 2028, do you think that's a realistic concern for people to have when you see something this aggressive about something that's been an American institution, the White House?
I'm not sure about that, whether the idea that he'll push for a third term. I mean, this is just quintessential Donald Trump. If you study his career in the 1980s in New York, he despised historic preservation. He fought them every sense of the way. He has no interest in the public lands or lakes or rivers. He thinks that a builder building, blowing up, and he doesn't. And then I hear commentators, Trump supporters saying, well, Theodore Roosevelt changed the White House. Theodore Roosevelt hated noise. He had pockets full of nuts to feed the squirrels. While Theodore Roosevelt was president, he wrote a book on the birds of Washington, D.C., and he didn't like to have the automobile because it made a racket. This is not Theodore Roosevelt coming in and smashing a hunk of American heritage. You do restoration with finesse and an open public forum and talk about it. This, to me, is just more grandiosity. He wants a Mar-a-Lago in Washington. He likes things gold. He has certain kinds of taste, and he's going to impose them on the American people. But to build an auditorium that's going to dwarf the White House, what the hell? Washington, D.C. is filled with ballrooms. You can't turn a corner in Washington without a ballroom. I mean, if you're going to do it modestly. But of course, he doesn't do that because he thinks it makes him look big time because he thinks something bigger.
But Jason, he does bulldoze voting rights. Let's be honest. He bulldozes maps of districts, even when Republicans are concerned about changing. So I do think your point and the metaphor here, which is he's willing to blow up and bulldoze even the most basic guardrails that ensure that people get to say who leads this country, who leads in the House or the Senate, is absolutely a big part of his agenda, and he doesn't mind lying to get there.
Are Democrats coming back next week in person? Yes, and our view is that, we're ready, we're willing, we're able to sit down with anyone, anytime, any place, either on the Hill or back at the White House to reopen the government, to enact a bipartisan spending agreement. But that spending agreement, as we've repeatedly said, has to actually make life better for the American people, not worse. And of course, it has to decisively address the Republican healthcare crisis, crushing people all across the country. We expect that Mike Johnson and House Republicans will cancel votes for a 5th consecutive week, which is extraordinary. Be on vacation in the middle of a shutdown for 5 consecutive weeks. They shut the government down, and they don't want to reopen it because they are unwilling to address the healthcare crisis that they've created.
So you all had polling this week. We talked about some of the public polling from the AP and NRC, and there was Washington Post poll, but the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee also did some polling that they presented to the members. I saw the polling myself, sir. And I have to note that in that polling, it was battleground state polling, and Republicans were only blamed in a slight edge for the shutdown. So I have to wonder, how is that informing your strategy, especially with November 1st coming up? And that is the day where open enrollment starts for folks. And they will see the real numbers for their, what the healthcare premiums are going to be going into next year. So how is this affecting your strategy, given what you now know from the battlegrounds?
Well, it's important to remember in the context of the battleground states that these are districts that Donald Trump won on average by 3 to 4 points. These are 50-50 districts that leaned slightly in Donald Trump's favor in the last election, but now a majority of voters, and perhaps most importantly, a significant majority of independents are holding Republicans correctly responsible for shutting down the government because of their unwillingness to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now, what we've seen from public polling all across the country, of course, is that when asked the question, who's more responsible for shutting down the government consistently, it's Trump and House Republicans. The reality is they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They've taken this my way or the highway approach since the very beginning of Donald Trump coming back into office. And of course, it's understandable that they are bearing the brunt of responsibility, and they've been unwilling to negotiate. And we continue to say, let's sit down, let's find a bipartisan path forward. But we also have to address the healthcare crisis that's crushing people in rural America, urban America, small town America, the heartland of America, and of course, Black and brown communities throughout America.
Yeah, because the chairman always talks about what he's hearing from Republicans and.
Yeah, no, and to that very point, you talk about they have the control and they have the House, the Senate, the White House, and all of that. But the countermeasure to what you're describing is what we saw play out today in the Senate, where you had 3 Senate Democrats vote in favor of the worker pay bill. Senator Ossoff of Georgia, Fetterman of Pennsylvania, and Warnock of Georgia. So how do you stay on message when the countermeasure to what you're doing now, which has been effective, the messaging around health care, sort of leveling up what the impact of all this is having on real people out there. But now Republicans say, OK, I see you. I got one more for you. Hard bill after hard bill after hard vote after hard vote. How do Democrats message that and strategically work with that at the same time holding their ground on the thing that's gotten them the numbers that they see, regardless, to Simone's point, may be slim, but you know what it's like to get a majority today, right?
That's right.
It's not easy.
This is a 50-50 country. Right. It's evenly divided. So the fact that all of the public polling continues to be clear where the responsibility falls correctly in terms of how the American people see this, and they also know that we're standing up for issues that matter to them. The high cost of living in this country is out of control. And Donald Trump promised to lower costs on day one. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Trump tariffs making life more expensive. Grocery costs up, housing costs up, electricity bills through the roof. And now you're talking about tens of millions of people who are about to confront these dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles on November 1st, which is the start of open enrollment, because of Republicans' refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now, the Republicans are going to try to advance gotcha vote after gotcha vote after gotcha vote. But I think it's been extraordinary to see not just House Democrats, but House and Senate Democrats together standing up, unified, strong on behalf of the American people, because we know we're on the right side of issues that matter. And I expect to see that continuously from Leader Schumer, who's done a great job, and Senate Democrats who've done a great job.
Can we talk about redistricting with you? There is, I'm just going to read this most recent reporting from the Washington Post. To counter Trump, Virginia Democrats plan to redraw a congressional map. Lawmakers could take the first steps, calling the Virginia General Assembly into special session as soon as Thursday, less than 2 weeks before the state holds elections, which includes its gubernatorial race and races for all 100 seats of the state's House of Delegates. There was additional reporting noting that they are planning for a session this upcoming Monday, I do believe. It's our understanding you've been very engaged and involved, specifically, not necessarily with what Virginia is doing, but that you all are supportive of the effort. But Illinois, obviously California, potentially in Ohio. Are you going to be able to counter what Republicans are doing? They're going to get about 19 seats if their efforts are successful. Will you be able to net enough seats to be competitive?
21. Yes, well, with respect to the Supreme Court, that's one aspect of it. And certainly, we believe that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act should remain in place and is constitutional. That's going to come down, to Chief Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh, who, by the way, just 2 years ago in the Alabama case, affirmed Section 2. And so, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I don't think there's any justification to eradicate the Voting Rights Act, and I don't believe it will be eradicated at the end of the day. Now, separate and apart from that, we've seen Republicans engage in this aggressive gerrymandering ordered by Donald Trump so they can rig the midterm elections. And we've been clear from the beginning, we will not allow Republicans to artificially maintain the majority and cheat their way back to holding the gavels. Texas acted. We've sued Texas. We expect a decision in the next few weeks. And there's a good chance that actually what Texas has done will be found to violate both the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and then that will kick up to the Supreme Court. In California, I was just there this weekend, campaigned on Saturday and Sunday with respect to Prop 50 to stop Trump from stealing the election. Prop 50 is going to be successful, and that will wipe out whatever it is that Texas Republicans and Donald Trump thought they were doing in the Lone Star State. And then, of course, from there, we go state by state by state. In Ohio, where we have a chance to take any gerrymandered map that they enact to a referendum and have that invalidated. And just like we're going to be successful in California, we'll do that in Ohio. We can do the same thing in Missouri, and we're collecting signatures right now in Missouri to invalidate that gerrymandered map where they tried to wipe away the district in Kansas City represented wonderfully by Reverend Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. We will be successful in Missouri, I believe, in invalidating what they've done in Missouri. Then, of course, they've got North Carolina, this, that, or the other state, a handful that they'll try to go in. And I think Democratic governors have also been clear in Illinois, in Maryland in particular, saying we will respond forcefully and appropriately. And that's a Democratic position all across the country.